So hi, everyone. My name is Christine Hendon. I'm an associate professor of electrical engineering at Columbia University. And today I'm happy to introduce to you optocardio. Cardiac ablation therapy is a technology that's used to treat cardiac arrhythmias or abnormal rhythms of the heart. This is a transformational technology, but it is minimally invasive, which means that it's done in a closed chest procedure, and the electrophysiologist doesn't have a view of the heart wall. And so if we think about this procedure, if we want to create lesions or discrete areas of necrosis within the heart, we want to be sure where we're ablating, how much we're ablating, to ensure that we provide the most efficacious therapy. Optocardio is a catheter that integrates near-infrared spectroscopy that's going to transform cardiac ablation therapies to precision therapy. And so some of the key takeaways for this talk are, first, cardiac ablation therapy, even though it has been revolutionized the field of cardiac electrophysiology, for complex arrhythmias such as atrial fibrillation and ventricular tachycardia, the success rate is only about 50%. And what that means is that after the procedure, which can, occur over a number of hours, within 1 year, the patient needs to come back for another ablation procedure. The amount of patients within our country and across the world that have arrhythmias are growing because we have an aging population. So optocardio is going to integrate, as you can see in this figure, is going to integrate optical fibers into standard ablation catheters and works in conjunction with the ablation system and mapping system to reduce the recurrence rate and procedure time of cardiac ablation therapy. This is a transformational approach that is going to target the actual pathology. So sensing directly what's happening underneath the catheter tip in real time to do three main things. First is to measure lesion quality, which is the lesion depth, the lesion transmurality, to ensure that it's going throughout the entire wall, to assess complications and detect precursors to that complication so the complications don't occur. One type of complication is called a steam pop, where you actually hear an audible sound, and that actually causes a perforation throughout the through the wall, and then the patient needs to go into surgery. And also to detect targets for ablation therapy. So you want to analyze the substrates underneath the catheter. You want to know if you're by fat, if you're by fibrosis or increased amounts of collagen, or let's say if you're by coronary artery and you should not ablate. And so far, optocardio catheters have been demonstrated acutely within swine experiments and ex vivo within the lab within donor human hearts. So first, let's go through why we have this large need. So during an ablation procedure, the electrophysiologist will typically conduct what's called an electroanatomic mapping procedure, where they will collect multiple sites, where at each site they have a time trace of voltage. And that can then be interpreted to identify the site or the target that is supporting the arrhythmia and where they should ablate. Once they navigate their catheter to the site, they will deliver the energy and then test to ensure that the arrhythmia has been terminated. So during the procedure, there is actually no direct feedback in terms of the lesion quality. And so acutely, you may think that you've created a transmural lesion, but it actually isn't. But then you also have to balance that with the risk of complications. You don't want to just burn too long, because then you have the risk of complications such as the steam pop or damaging adjacent structures such as the esophagus. And so clinicians really need a reliable independent assessment of the substrate identification, lesion quality during the procedure to enable personalized therapy. And so our solution to this is optocardio. Optocardio is going to transform ablation procedures to therapy with the use of near-infrared spectroscopy. Here I'm showing a number of examples of our technology. First, we can target the underlying pathology. This has been demonstrated for both ventricular substrates and also atrial substrates. So here's an example of a map of the epicardium, or the outside of the surface of a human heart, where we can see in yellow, that's adipose, which actually within an electroanatomic map appears as low voltage, and that can be confused with other things like fibrosis. And also we can detect where we place the lesions. Here, this is an example of a map of a human left atrium, where we can also identify optical signatures of fibrosis. We also have direct assessment of lesion quality. We can track changes in optical signal in real time. So as you're creating the ablation lesion, and we've developed algorithms to identify when you actually have a transmural lesion, which means that the lesion goes throughout the entire wall. And this is the goal that you want. And also you can see here in the case where we have a steam pop or an adverse effect, we can see rapid changes in the optical signal. And so with this, real-time feedback can be given to the operator to stop energy delivery. And so with this, we could target underlying pathology, assess lesion quality, and reduce complications. So our value propositions are: first, we'll decrease procedure time by having direct real-time assessment of lesion quality, substrates, and I also didn't mention contact. Just knowing that your catheter is in contact will reduce the amount of time that the electrophysiologist has to do repeated tests. This reduction in procedure time is a win for everyone in the room, with reduction in fluoroscopy or X-ray radiation, and a reduction in anesthesia time for the patients. It will lower the probability of complications, improve professional reputations, will reduce the number of repeat procedures, because if we actually create the transmural lesion the first time, then the arrhythmia is cured and the patient doesn't need to come back. And there have been studies that have shown that for patients who've had repeat procedures, they've incurred 40K in medical expenses during that year. For our intellectual property, we've filed a number of provisional patent applications. Some of the key claims of our patent applications include optical parameters for distinguishing key substrates such as fibrosis, adipose, pulmonary veins, coronary arteries, and also assessing contact of the catheter. Optical parameters for quantifying lesion dimensions and transmurality within the atrium and the ventricle, and the algorithms to enable 3D optical substrate mapping. For our competitive landscape, the landscape is large. This is an important problem. Here I've highlighted some important features, and in this first column, showcasing the different sensing modalities that the other technologies are using. In most cases, companies are focused on improving the mapping or the 3D localization. And where Optocardio comes in is that we are able to provide both improvements in measuring lesion depth and substrate characterization. And so the market size is large. As I mentioned earlier, it's growing. This is a global market. And in this particular case for Optocardio, it's both a mapping market and also an ablation catheter market. And we have some initial ideas for a business model. This will include streams from capital equipment, so the actual console that includes our light source and detector, disposables from the catheter, and the software as a service for the software generation. And so, so now our immediate funding are for professional prototypes, algorithm development, and in vivo studies. And this will bring us to a regulatory submission and our first in man in 2025. And so with that, I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank all of our team and our advisors, and I'd like to take any questions.